What happens when a product designed to save infants becomes a tool for expanding a market? That question emerged in the 1970s, when Nestle faced an international boycott over its promotion of infant formula in developing nations. The controversy was not simply about one product. It was about how sales tactics, corporate incentives, and weak public health safeguards interacted in places where clean water, medical support, and reliable incomes were limited. Infant formula can provide nutrition when breastfeeding is impossible or insufficient, but it must be mixed with safe water, measured correctly, and prepared with clean equipment. Those conditions were not guaranteed in many of the markets Nestle was targeting. The same product could therefore be useful in one setting and dangerous in another, depending on the infrastructure surrounding it. Nestle saw a major commercial opportunity. Population growth and rising urbanization were creating new consumer markets across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Formula offered recurring sales because families had to keep buying it. Breastfeeding, by contrast, required no monthly purchase. That difference created a straightforward business incentive. Converting a natural feeding practice into a packaged product could produce a continuing revenue stream. The company's marketing approach brought that incentive into maternity wards, clinics, pharmacies, and homes. Sales representatives promoted formula directly to mothers and health workers. Reports also described representatives dressed as nurses, a presentation that could make commercial advice appear medically independent. The important issue was not only what was said, it was who appeared to be saying it, and what authority that appearance implied. Free samples made the decision easier to begin and harder to reverse. A mother could receive formula without paying, try it, and then experience a practical problem. Once regular feeding with formula reduced breast milk production, returning to exclusive breastfeeding could become difficult. The initial sample therefore worked like a low-cost entry point, but the consequences extended beyond the first transaction. This is where marketing ethics becomes a public health question. Advertising normally assumes that consumers can compare products, assess risks, and change their minds. New mothers in under-resourced settings often faced very different conditions. They might receive incomplete information, have limited access to health care, or rely on advice from someone who seemed to represent medical expertise. The company benefited when a household shifted from breastfeeding to formula. Retailers gained a product that required repeat purchases. Distributors gained a growing supply chain. Sales teams gained evidence that their campaigns were reaching new consumers. The mother, however, carried most of the practical risk. She had to find money for future supplies, secure clean water, and maintain safe preparation every day. The imbalance became sharper when free samples entered hospitals. A hospital is not perceived as an ordinary marketplace. Its setting signals safety, expertise, and institutional approval. When commercial promotion appears inside that environment, consumers may reasonably interpret access as an endorsement, even if no formal medical recommendation has been made. The use of nurse-like representatives exploited that psychological shortcut. People often trust uniforms, clinical settings, and confident instructions because those signals reduce uncertainty. But reducing uncertainty through appearance is different from providing complete evidence. A sales tactic can remain technically indirect while still shaping a decision more powerfully than a conventional advertisement. The central conflict was therefore between aggressive sales growth and responsibility to consumers. Nestle did not need to believe that formula was harmful in every situation. The company only needed to treat the product as broadly marketable and leave local conditions to be managed later. That reasoning converted a complex health decision into a distribution problem. Corporate governance can encourage that kind of reasoning. Managers are often evaluated through sales growth, market share, and expansion into new territories. Those measures are easy to count. The quality of a mother's information, the cleanliness of preparation water, and the long-term health of an infant are harder to place on a sales report. When performance is measured narrowly, risks outside the accounting system can become invisible. A regional team may view free samples as successful promotion. A headquarters department may see strong distribution. A retailer may see reliable demand. None of those records necessarily captures whether families diluted formula to make it last longer, used unsafe water, or stopped breastfeeding without adequate replacement nutrition. Diluting formula creates a particularly serious risk. Families with limited money may add extra water so a container lasts longer. That reduces the nutritional value of each feeding. Unsafe water or unsterilized bottles can also introduce infections. The product may be manufactured safely, yet the surrounding system can make its use unsafe. This distinction matters because responsibility cannot stop at the factory gate. A company may control production quality while influencing behavior at the point of use. If its marketing encourages a feeding change, its duty to communicate preparation requirements becomes more important, not less. Packaging instructions alone may not reach mothers who cannot read them or cannot meet the conditions they describe. The controversy grew as journalists, health advocates, and church groups connected commercial promotion with these practical risks. In the 1970s, public criticism spread across borders and developed into a boycott of Nestle products. The boycott turned an issue that might have remained inside hospitals and marketing departments into a question of corporate conduct visible to consumers worldwide. Nestle rejected the most serious interpretations of the campaign and defended the usefulness of infant formula in appropriate circumstances. That position contained a real point. Formula can be necessary and beneficial when breastfeeding is not possible. But the existence of legitimate uses did not answer the separate question of whether marketing methods were appropriate in communities lacking safe water and strong medical support. The dispute revealed how companies can frame responsibility at the level of the product, while critics examine the level of the system. Nestle could focus on formula's nutritional design. Public health advocates focused on advertising, affordability, preparation, and local infrastructure. Both perspectives described part of the same chain, but only one fully followed the product from factory to infant. International regulation developed partly in response to that conflict. The World Health Organization later adopted an international code governing the marketing of breast milk substitutes. The code addressed promotion to the public, distribution of free samples, and the use of health facilities for commercial marketing. Its purpose was to place boundaries around a market where ordinary advertising could affect feeding decisions with medical consequences. A voluntary code, however, does not automatically create accountability. Countries had to translate international standards into national rules, monitor companies, and decide what penalties would apply. Enforcement varied. That gap between written guidance and practical oversight allowed questions to persist about whether corporate promises were being followed consistently. The episode also shows why global markets can magnify local weaknesses. In a wealthy country, a family may have clean tap water, refrigeration, sterilizing equipment, and access to medical advice. In a poorer community, those supports may be absent. A single marketing strategy can therefore produce very different outcomes across borders, even when the product itself is identical. The harmed parties were not limited to individual infants. Families could face higher expenses, preventable illness, and difficult choices about scarce household resources. Health systems could absorb additional treatment needs. Communities could bear the cost of risks created by a commercial decision made far from the people affected by it. The broader lesson concerns information asymmetry, meaning one side knows more than the other. Nestle understood the product, the campaign, and the market strategy. Mothers often had less information about preparation risks, the economics of continued use, and the effect of early supplementation on breastfeeding. When the better-informed side also controls the message, consent becomes less meaningful. This pattern appears beyond infant nutrition. Companies regularly enter markets where consumers lack time, expertise, or alternatives. A persuasive label, a trusted uniform, or a free trial can influence behavior before people understand the long-term cost. The question is not whether every sale is improper. It is whether the selling process hides the conditions required for safe use. The Nestle boycott did not prove that one company alone created every infant health problem in developing nations. Poverty, unsafe water, inadequate health care, and weak regulation already existed. But the controversy showed how commercial pressure could interact with those vulnerabilities and make them more consequential. Markets do not operate above society. They use the infrastructure society provides. That is why the history remains relevant. A product can be scientifically sound, legally available, and profitable while still being marketed in a way that creates preventable harm. The decisive question is not only what a company sells, but what behavior its incentives reward. What information consumers receive, and who pays when the surrounding system fails. When growth depends on turning trust into sales, who is responsible for the consequences? If you enjoy breaking down the incentives, decisions, and systems behind corporate scandals, not just the headlines, subscribe for new investigations every week. Because understanding why it happened is the best way to recognize it happening again.